There are bacteria out there that have learned to thwart our medications, and so we can no longer kill them. They're called superbugs, and they exist all around the world. I myself actually contracted one of these my senior year in high school. It was a form of strep throat that was resistant to the main antibiotic that is used to treat it. And as a result, I ended up missing a lot more school than you'd expect for just a sore throat. So if I can contract one of these, that means all of you can as well. So let me arm you with some of the information that we have about the fight against this threat. All right. So what exactly is a superbug, and how do these resistances occur? A superbug refers to any type of microbe that has developed some sort of resistance to the main drug that is used to treat it. And according to a study in microbiology and microbial biology reviews, these resistances can occur mainly in two different ways. First is through direct contact with the antibiotic. So if you have an antibiotic and you're using it to treat against some sort of bacterial infection and you don't quite have enough of a dose to kill off all of the bacteria, the remaining ones may have developed some sort of resistance to it through random mutation. Now, a slightly higher dose of the antibiotic may have been enough to kill those few cells, but if they're allowed to replicate and reproduce, then the next time you have to treat it, it will require a much higher dose of the antibiotic. The second way that this can happen is through a process called bacteria conjugation. This occurs when two similar strains of bacteria come into contact with each other, and they can actually trade genetic material a little bit, so that a strain that has never actually come into contact with the antibiotic can learn the resistance from another strain that has. So it never even has to see the antibiotic to become resistant to it. This occurs much less often than the first way, but it's still a threat. So how big of a threat is this? A few years ago, a paper was published in the Indian Journal for Medical Sciences that listed most of the superbugs that we knew at the time. A few were pretty common, such as strep throat strains and the kind of bacteria that causes staph infections, but a few were more concerning, such as certain strains of tuberculosis and salmonella that actually had multi-drug resistances. That means that our second or third line of defense against these diseases might not even work against them. This graph actually shows the increase in the problem as well. So this is the number of strains over the years that have these beta-lactamase enzymes. What these enzymes do is essentially shut down penicillin and allow the bacteria to survive through a much higher dose, or maybe not even be affected by it at all. As you can see, back in 1970, a few strains existed that scientists were aware of, but over the years, as more people have gained access to this drug and more people are using it, the rise in resistant bacteria to it is exponential as well. So there is some things that you and I can actually do to help slow down this rise in superbugs, enough for modern medicine to catch up to them, so to speak. The first thing that we need to do is simply just use less antibiotics. So that means not using things like antibacterial soap. In fact, recently the FDA actually passed a ban on these types of products, stating that the risks they incur are actually much greater than any benefits they may provide. Secondly, we need to make antibiotics prescription only. So currently what we see is a lot of people will take antibiotics as more of a precautionary measure, and scientists are hoping that making it prescription only will cut down on that and make it so that we aren't using them as often. We need to use less antibiotics in our produce. So most farmers nowadays are just pumping their animals full of these antibiotics as a precautionary thing again. And this can lead to a rise in resistant bacteria in the animals, and sometimes those can be passed on to humans through consumption of the meat or eggs or whatever it may be. So you and I, what we should do is make a conscious effort to buy meat and produce that's raised with less antibiotics. And hopefully in the future, that'll encourage farmers to use less in the meat they produce. And finally, we need to always take the full dosage of antibiotics that we are prescribed. So if you have strep throat, for example, and you're prescribed some antibiotics to treat it, and you're supposed to take it for 6 days, but you feel better after 2, continue to take it for those 6 days, because even though you may feel better, you don't necessarily have all the bacteria killed off. So those that survive may have a slight resistance to that antibiotic, and if you get sick from them again, or you pass them on to another person, you may need a higher dosage of the antibiotic to defeat it the next time. So these resistant bacteria are becoming a larger problem year after year, And if we don't take a proactive stance against them, soon they may begin to affect our everyday lives. So the next time you reach for that antibacterial soap or you want to take some antibiotics just to be safe, stop yourself because you probably don't need it. And it may not affect you immediately, but in the future, we'll all be glad that we weren't part of the problem in creating the next superbug that we can't defeat.